Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope this video can make it a little bit better for you. Today we're giving our guide for Tryndamere, the Barbarian King. Let's just jump right into it. Started off with his card. So he is a 8-cost Freljord unit with 8/6 stat line and Overwhelm. Since he's an 8-cost, he's going to be pretty difficult to play normally, but you do have another method to try to get him on your board without having to spend this mana. But baseline is going to be very difficult to just play him as is. But it's a pretty good stat line, and then also a great level up. When I would die, I level up instead. So anytime the enemy tries to kill this unit, or if you're doing an attack and the enemy has a big blocker, or you block, the enemy has a big attacker, just anytime you would die, you instead level up, so you fully heal, you go to 9/9, and now you also get the Fearsome and Tough. So he is pretty hard to get off the board. Now, if the enemy does have like a Obliterate, that is still going to go through, because that doesn't actually count as killing him, it just makes him cease existing. Pretty much he gets Thanos snapped out of existence. So watch out for Obliterates, but other than that, it's going to be pretty hard to get off the board, although recalls can work as well. Now his champion spell, again, it's an 8-cost, so pretty expensive, but it's burst speed, grant an ally 8/4, and then create the Tryndamere in your deck. So again, going to be pretty difficult to play until the late game, but it does give you a massive combat trick at burst speed. Now let's go ahead and take a look at your Constellation. So we'll go over the layout once we go through the powers, but first let's just take a look here. So round start, if you have the attack token, create a call to arms in hand, or reduce its cost by 2 if you already have one. So you see that call to arms right here, 5-cost focus speed, updraft 1, so that updraft is taking a card from your hand, reducing its cost by 1 and putting it back into your deck. So you updraft 1 to summon the top ally from your deck. So any skills you can use to kind of guarantee what your top deck is going to be, such as like a predict, can be very good for you, but then you're summoning that unit. This is going to be your main way of trying to cheat out your Tryndamere as well as other units. While baseline, this is a fairly expensive card. If you're spending 5 mana on this, that's still going to be a lot cheaper than spending the 8 mana on Tryndamere. And since this is a spell, it also can use spell mana, which can be easier to generate than the normal mana. Let's keep moving on though. So we have Bloodlust +1 starting mana. When allies attack, grant allies in your deck 1/1. So this is giving you some scaling, which can be pretty good. Obviously, there's a way to build around this. Just the more attacks you can do, whether that's free attacks, rally, scout attack, any of that, it's going to give you more scaling. And this is just allies in your deck, so it's not allies everywhere or anything like that. You have to have the units in your deck, which is also why this call to arms can be nice, because you can then put a card from your hand back in your deck, so it can further scale up. Also, since this gives you cost reduction, if you have like a handful of big units, you can keep using this to try to shuffle some of those bigger units back in your deck, further get cost reduction, further get scaling, and overall it works pretty well for you. Your 3-star then, round start, create that call to arms in hand, or reduce its cost by 2 if you already have one. So it just is changing this from a round start if you have the attack token, just be every round start it's making a new one, or it's reducing down the one you have in hand by 2, kind of making sure you're going to be able to play this after a round or 2, which overall is pretty solid. And this really is the core to your kit. Pretty much everything is built around this, and it's a pretty interesting and unique mechanic. Taking a look at your 4-star though, we have Treacherous Terrain each round. The first time the foe summons a unit, frostbite it. So this is giving you just some decent control and survivability. We have Mana Flow, and then for the 6-star, when you summon an ally, double its stats this round, so it is temporary just for the round, and when you play your call to arms, which is what you get from your 3-star, you now rally. So your 6-star is still relying on that call to arms that you're generating, but now every time you play it, you're getting that rally so you can attack more, which then works really well with your 2nd-star power. And then also just doubling the stats anytime you summon a unit is very, very good, even if it is for the round. Overall, his star powers are pretty good. I will say there's a lot of power in your 6-star. So there's some champions that don't feel like the 6-star is as necessary to get, such as like Yasuo, Echo, Samira. I do feel though that Tryndamere is one where you really do want to try to get his 6-star if you can, just because there's so much power in there, giving you a ton of stats and giving you a now consistent rally. You do get a pretty massive power spike by getting this. Now let's take a look at some of the bonus stars. So here we have 8 regen, always nice and solid. Your support champs have Titan's Axe, Phage, or Stud Leather, so they're just getting some extra stats based on their cost. This is overall fine, making whatever support champ you get going to be a little stronger, but kind of pushing you towards getting some of those more expensive champions since they'll get the bigger items on them. Kind of wish this was a little bit more impactful, whether it give your units like Scout or maybe a free attack, just to kind of synergize a little bit more with your 2nd-star power. We have Star of Blessings. Your Elixir of Iron has Elixir of Sorcery, so copy me on the same targets. So it goes from a give 2 to a give 4. This is okay, and it can be great if you get other good items on your Elixir of Iron, but especially in the higher end adventures, making this a +4 instead of a +2 doesn't actually often end up saving your unit, but especially in lower end adventures, this will be quite nice. Star of Discovery follows you acquiring adventures that cost 4 or more, have the ancient coins, just giving you a little bit of cost reduction. This is nice since you are trying to get often fairly big units. You can try to cheat out with your call to arms. Although since you're trying to cheat them out with the call to arms, you're not actually playing them regardless. Still, if you have to play any of them yourself, this is going to help you with that. Then we have the Star of Wonder. Your Hearthguard gets Shadow Totem, so play summon an exact ephemeral copy of me. Now this is really good because when I'm summoned, grant all allies in your deck 1/1. One issue though is that for Tryndamere, you really rely on a lot of summon effects since your call to arms summons the unit, and Shadow Totem is a play effect. So sadly, this will only trigger if you actually manually play the unit, not when they get summoned from your call to arms, but it is still a solid power. Then all the rest here are just the gemstone upgrades. So if we take a look at your Constellation as far as the layout, up here you get your first star, second star, and then third star. From here it branches out, so you can go up and get some of the gemstone upgrades, or you can head up and get your 4-star, or you can head down here and start getting some of the bonus nodes, which are pretty nice. Now, one issue with this is, for one, it's pretty linear. You can only kind of choose what path to go to this way or that way. And then it does have one of the most impactful upgrades locked. So here's your 4th star. Then this node is locked behind the 4th star, which normally the 4th star is not too bad to get. Then we have your 5-star, and then here we have the Shadow Totem upgrade for your Hearthguard. And so you either have to get the 6-star right here, as you see that, or the 5-star in order to unlock this node. So the layout, not the best. Always sad when a good upgrade or any upgrade is locked behind, especially the 5 or 6-star, or really any of the star powers, but especially the 5 and 6-star since those are the hardest to get. Let's go ahead though and take a look at your starting deck. So you see we have the Elixir of Iron with that hand sensor. This is an upgrade you get from leveling up. Grant the top ally in your deck 1/1. Pretty good since you are all about buffing up your deck and trying to pull out your top unit. We have the Pouty Poro, so 1 cost with that Giant's Belt gets the extra 3 health, Empower 3, Overwhelm, Regen, and Tough. So a pretty small unit, but if this is getting buffed up while being in your deck and you pull it out, it can actually be pretty solid for you. Then we have Caught in the Cold. This gets upgraded to burst speed, give an enemy frostbite and vulnerable this round, and has that Porous next to give you another blocker. Overall, pretty decent, and this is actually one of your main removal tools with that vulnerable. Then we have the Snow Dog, so 2 cost, 2/3 with that Locket. Attack at the top 2 allies in your deck 1/1. That barrier is nice, being able to play this as a solid blocker, or being able to play it and attack and get this attack effect off and make sure he doesn't die with that barrier. It's overall nice solid upgrade right there. Then we have the Hunting Boar, so 3 cost, 5/2 with the Challenger and Colossal Hammer. Can't block though, and Last Breath, get an empty mana gem. This card is both great and terrible at the same time. So for one, it has a good amount of stats and has the Skirmishing Saber to try to be able to kill some enemy units. So again, this is one of your limited forms of removal, and this can help you block, and having a Challenger with a Last Breath effect is good because you can try to make sure this unit can actually get blocked and die. But this can't block is actually quite annoying, especially when you know the enemy is preparing for an attack. You use your Call to Arms to try to just get out another blocker, and then it pulls out this unit, and it often kind of just screws you over a little bit. So this is actually one that I normally cut, because often I just kind of get frustrated with the can't block effect, but it can be good for you in some situations. Then we have the Mighty Poro, so 3 cost, 5/5, Overwhelm with that Phage. Overall, just really big, solid unit, especially for a 3 cost. Then we have the Glacial Sorin, so 4 cost, 5/4 with that Ancient Coin. Overwhelm, when I'm summoned, grant the top 3 units to deck 1/1, and if any of them has a different subtype than me, draw one of those units. So this is your only draw in your entire deck, and it is a bit situational, which is not the best. But as you see, you do actually have a decent amount of subtypes, because this is a reptile, you have a Poro, another Poro, and then also a dog. So you actually do have a decent amount of subtypes in there. Then we have the Hearthguard with that Overwhelm. When I'm summoned, grant all allies in your deck 1/1. And remember, this also gets that Shadow Totem if you can get the Constellation upgrade. Overall, your starting deck is okay, but it does have some pretty big drawbacks. For one, you don't have any draw in here other than the Sorin, and its draw is only 1 unit, and it's situational at best. So that's really lacking, something you definitely need to work around, trying to get some more draw or card generation. Now, you do generate a card potentially every round from your 3rd star power, but that card also updrafts a card, so by playing it, you're also having to put a card back in your deck, so it's not really giving you just a free card to play. Also, your removal isn't great, so it's either through the Hunting Boar with the Challenger, or with the Caught in the Cold with the Vulnerable, and that is your only removal. So that's another thing you really need to try to work on, either getting more Challenger units, or just trying to get some removal spells. So yeah, draw and removal, pretty rough. You don't really have a lot of tools with Tryndamere, it's just get big units and throw them at the enemy, and that's really all you have going for you, at least baseline. Let's go and take a look at your relics now. So up first, let's take a look at your common relics. Pretty simple and straightforward. Use the cosmic blessings if you want to level up as soon as possible. Go for the Chameleon's Necklace if you want some extra copies of Tryndamere, so you can try to have a higher chance of pulling him out with your Call to Arms. Go for Starchild Staff if you need that extra regen in those early adventures when you have such limited Nexus health, or just go for Z-Drive for the extra rerolls to try to make sure you get the right powers and upgrades. As far as rare relics, it is a bit of an interesting batch since Tryndamere, being an 8 cost, it's very hard to get him on the board, or kind of unreliable, and a lot of relics need your champion to be on the board, so it can be a little bit mixed. You're not going to get the same amount of value or as consistent value as some other champions. Now, Archangel Staff, getting the extra spell mana, again, he has to be on the board for this to activate, but getting this on him can make it easier to consistently play your Call to Arms in the later game, which can be quite nice. Same with that Chemtech Duplicator is excellent. If you play a spell, if you have 6 or more mana gems, copy it with the same targets. Now, with Tryndamere, normally by the time he's on the board, it's going to be around or most likely after you hit that 6 or more mana anyways. And this actually works really well with your Call to Arms. It still only updrafts 1 card, so you're putting 1 card back in your deck, but then it's summoning 2 units for you. So Chemtech Duplicator is actually pretty solid. Now, you can always go for a stat relic if you want. Condenser can be a little funny, but it's actually not terrible. Support, create a 1-cost, 1/1 copy of my supported ally in hand. Often you're going to get units that have really good like summon effects, and so creating a small version so you can play it again and trigger that summon effect can actually be decent for you. And since you quite often run into issues where you're running out of things to play, this can somewhat help mitigate that. Crown Guard Inheritance is actually excellent when I level up a rally. You can normally have a pretty good influence on when he is going to die and then level up, and so this can just give you a really strong attack and finisher. Normally, if you want to go for this one, I would pair it with the Blade Rack so you get that challenger, so you can make sure you're getting the trades. You can attack, level up, and attack again. Gale Force is kind of a funny one. Scout, Ren, round, and shuffle me into your deck. This can be somewhat similar where you can try to pull out your Tryndamere with your Call to Arms and then be able to attack twice with him. And then he's going to shuffle back into your deck so you can try to pull him out again. Now, the issue is if you pull out Tryndamere when it's not your attack turn, then he's just going to get sent back. So that can be a downside. Now, you can try to pair this with like Echoing Spirit, so you get a bunch of copies of your Tryndamere, and especially if you have him at 6 stars, where when you pull him out, you're going to get the attack token. It can actually be pretty decent, but again, it can be a bit inconsistent, so be aware of that. Like I mentioned earlier, Blade Rack is actually excellent for you. Allies have Challenger. Now, about half of your units in your starting deck do have Overwhelm, but you still have a good amount that don't, and then whatever cards you pick up aren't necessarily going to have Overwhelm either. So the Blade Rack is nice, making sure you can have your Overwhelm units be challenging the enemy, and then your other units without Overwhelm can just attack and hit the Nexus, giving you some more damage. And this also works really well for removal, since you don't really have any removal generally. This can just help you take out enemy targets. Now again, Tryndamere has to be on the board for this to work, so that's a bit of a downside, but pairing this with Crown Guard is actually very strong, and normally what I would recommend doing for a rare relic build for him. Stalker's Blade, when I'm summoned, I strike the weakest enemy. This can be decent. You're trying to summon him anyways, normally with your Call to Arms, and this is just going to make his summon a little bit more impactful for you, so that's not too bad. Now, Gatebreaker, this is a play effect, and normally you're not wanting to play Tryndamere, so this is one that I would often not recommend. And then last up, let's talk about Troll King's Crown. Allies have Overwhelm. Similar to Blade Rack, this can be really good, but it does have that massive caveat that he has to be on the board for this to activate. So that can be a little rough and again, a bit inconsistent, but it still is pretty nice to just make sure all your units can attack and get their damage through and not have to worry about blockers as much. Let's take a look at Epic Relics now. So we have Black Shield. When you summon an ally, granted Spell Shield. You are a very unit-focused deck, so just trying to protect all your units with the Spell Shield. Quite nice. Cease and Desist. Now this one, again, it is a play effect. Now you can hit that 10 power pretty easily with Tryndamere, but again, since it's a play effect, you're normally not going to want to really be dealing with that. Disciple of Shadows, I cost 1 less for each ally in play. Play deal 3 to all other allies. If you're trying to make him a bit cheaper, this can be decent for you. I don't really like trying to kill my own units with Tryndamere though. Normally you want to somewhat protect them, so this is one that I normally don't go with. Now Echoing, this can be pretty interesting for you. Game start, create 7 copies of me in your deck. Champion spells cost 1 less. This can be nice because now when you use your Call to Arms, you're much more likely to pull out a Tryndamere. So this can be really good in that regard. Sometimes you get a Tryndamere on the board like turn 2, and now you have this massive unit. And this can pair really well with things like Chemtech Duplicator, because you have a higher chance to get him on the board. Chemtech then has a higher chance to activate, and Chemtech with your Call to Arms is excellent. But Echoing can be inconsistent because you can have a bunch of copies of your Tryndamere, but you might have an issue where you suddenly pull out all of your Tryndamere in your opening hand, and now all your cards are 8 cost and then the 5 cost Call to Arms, and so you can somewhat brick your hand for the first couple rounds. That can be a little bit rough. Or you just have the issue where you just never pull out your Tryndamere, even though you have all the extra copies. So again, it can be really good, but it can also be a bit inconsistent. Found Fortune, again, play effect. You normally don't really want to do play effects with Tryndamere. Frozen Tomb, this actually can be nice. If I'm in your deck or hand, summon a Stormcarved Spire with countdown for summon me. So this is happening at the start of the game. So this is just a countdown landmark. This can be a nice way to make sure you actually get your Tryndamere on the board. And you can still potentially get multiple Tryndameres, because you could pull out one with your Call to Arms. This goes off and gives you a second one. This can be really good to pair with Chemtech Duplicator, because then you know you're going to get your Tryndamere on the board. And then this is a summon effect, so you can actually pair this really well with another relic, Portal Pals. When I'm summoned, create 2 random 7+ cost units from your regions and reduce their cost by my base cost. Now, since Tryndamere is an 8 cost champion, pretty much whatever you pull out here is going to be either free or heavily discounted. And since this is a summon effect, it will work both with Frozen Tomb as well as your Call to Arms. And this really helps kind of fix the issue with running out of things to play, because every time you summon Tryndamere, he's able to trigger this. So you'd often get this triggered a couple times in a game. Now, you often want to try to get out of Freljord. Freljord doesn't necessarily have the best 7+ cost units. Now, you can pull out another Tryndamere, but since Tryndamere is all you're going to be on the board, it's just going to turn into his champion spell. So this can be overall pretty decent, but probably want to try to get out of Freljord just to get some better units you can hit with this. But these two together do actually work out quite well. Couple more then to mention, we have Stack Deck, so 200 starting gold. I always have 1 for every 12 cards in your deck past 18 at game start. Now this is one I actually don't really recommend. Now, while it is great to buff up your units even more, with Tryndamere you normally want to have a fairly narrow deck just to make sure you're pulling out the right units, the right impactful units. And so trying to get a bunch of extra cards can actually fight against that a bit. So while it can be decent for you, not one I actually really recommend. Now, Starforge Gauntlets, game start, if I'm Titanic, +1 starting mana. This is obviously great for you. You're Titanic by default, so you can just throw this in and get +1 starting mana. And then Beast Within, allies have Overwhelm if they have a subtype 1/1. Since this is a power, even when Tryndamere is not on the board, this is still active. This is quite good, making sure all your units have Overwhelm. Now again, most of your starting deck does get Overwhelm, but whatever cards you pick up, whatever support champion you get, those probably aren't going to have it. So just making sure all of your units have Overwhelm is really nice. And you actually have a decent amount of subtypes, surprisingly. So a lot of units are actually getting that 1/1 as well. So this is actually very good to throw on. And then last up, we have Tryndamere's Relic, 10 Nexus Health, power if I'm Tryndamere. When you grant stats to a unit in your deck, grant twice as much. So Tryndamere with his 2nd star power and a lot of other effects in your deck, you're buffing up either your top deck or just your deck overall. So this is just doubling that and giving you the 10 Nexus Health. And since this is a power, Tryndamere doesn't need to be on the board. Now this is one that I thought was going to be really good, but I actually don't find it as impactful as you would really want. For one, Tryndamere doesn't have any scout or free attack or rally, any of that in his starting deck. So really, you're only attacking like once every other round. So you're actually not getting that much scaling from your 2nd star power. And by the time the scaling is really noticeable, it's pretty late in the game. And honestly, you want to get something that's going to help you more in your early game, where you're a lot weaker, than necessarily helping in the later game. Because Tryndamere is also someone that can very much run out of steam. Since you have 1 card that can maybe give you draw, and you also don't have any really card generation outside of your 3-star, you can run out of things to play. And so by the time you're actually getting these big units, you don't have any cards left to actually play them. You're just drawing like 1 card around essentially, and you're potentially having to shuffle that card back in with your Call to Arms. So overall, it's not actually as impactful as I really thought it would be. And while it is fine, it's not actually like a must pick up in my opinion. So if you really like Tryndamere, sure, go ahead and grab it. But if you're trying to pass on a relic, I think this one is perfectly fine to pass on. Now, if you want some example builds, this is one that is decent, going for Starforge, Beast Within, and Echoing, making sure all units have Overwhelm, get that 1/1 extra starting mana, and more copies of Tryndamere to try to pull out. Or you can just go for something like this, the Overwhelm, Black Shield, and the extra mana, just giving a bunch of passive buffs to all your units, and you're not really needing Tryndamere to be on the board at all. If he hits the board, great, he's a massive unit, but he's just passively buffing up everything you're doing pretty much. Or if you want another pretty fun build you can go for Frozen Tomb Portal Pals. This really helps make sure you guarantee you get your Tryndamere on the board. Make sure you get some other card generation, which is something Tryndamere really lacks. And then for the 3rd slot, it's really a flex pick. You could go for like Beast Within, Starforge Gauntlets, Chemtech Duplicator, Black Shield, his Relic. There's a lot of slots you could put in here. But overall, this is a pretty fun summon focus build that actually guarantees you're going to get your Tryndamere as long as they don't blow up your landmark, which pretty rarely happens. And then if you want a decent rare relic build, I really like the Crown Guard Inheritance, Blade Rack, and Duplicator. Now you do have to get Tryndamere on the board for this to really be able to do anything, but normally when you're around that 6 mana, you'll be able to pull him out by then. And this is just really nice, making sure all units have that overwhelm, getting that rally for a very strong finisher, and then the Chemtech duplicator, because doubling up your call to arms is incredibly powerful. All right, that's about it for relic builds. Let's go take a look now at what powers you want to look out for, support champs to consider, cards to look out for, and finish up with his rankings. All right, taking a look at some powers now. As always, not a exhaustive list, just some powers you might want to consider as you're going through. Also, we try to focus on just the rare and common powers. There's plenty of epic powers and legendaries that are awesome with Tryndamere, but those are a little bit more rare. We want to get you some, especially while you are leveling. Up first, counterfeit production. This one actually is quite fun. Round start, create a fleeting, 0 cost counterfeit copies in hand. Now that spell, what it does is it lets you put 4 copies of a chosen card back in your deck. And so this is great because you can take a card such as like Tryndamere, and every round be shuffling 4 more into your deck, so that when you use your call to arms, you're much more likely to pull out that unit. And so this can be awesome for stacking your deck full of very powerful cards. And so every time you pull out your call to arms, you have a very high likelihood of pulling out one of these super strong champions. Now, Crush allies have overwhelm, pretty much good on everyone, but especially for Tryndamere, since you are such a unit focused deck. So if you're not getting overwhelmed through like Beast Within, definitely want to consider picking up. Then we have Duelist. When you summon an ally, give a challenger this round. Since you don't have almost any removal outside of challenger on your own units, making sure all your units get that challenge when you play them, so you can try to make sure you're able to take out enemy threats, is very nice. So getting this is pretty good for you. Next up then, we have Feral Senses. Round start, create a fleeting Feral Prescience in hand. Now what this does is the 0 cost spell lets you predict, so you can choose what card is going to be on your top deck. That is really nice because then you know exactly what you're going to pull out with your call to arms. So again, just a way to make that a little bit more consistent, and so definitely one that's worth picking up. Then we have our memory game. Round start, create a fleeting copy of the last non-fleeting cards you played. This can be very good because it's, again, solving one of your biggest weaknesses with Tryndamere is just running out of things to play. But this is just giving you copy the last cards you played as long as it wasn't fleeting at every round start. And so with this, you're normally not going to run out of things to play anymore, since you're getting an extra card to play every single round. And so overall, quite nice to have. Then we have sorcery. Round start, refill your spell mana. But really, any of the effects that are going to make your call to arms a little bit easier to play. So this one is great, but also going for like Wild Inspiration, your created cards cost 1 less, or sorcery, all spells cost 1 less. Just anything that makes your call to arms easier to play. Very, very good. Last up then, Trifarian Might. When you summon a 5+ power ally, it strikes the weakest enemy. Now you're all about summon effects and you're all about big units, and you have a terrible lack of removal. This is kind of doing everything for you. Pretty much every unit you play or summon is going to be over that 5+ power, especially once you get into like the mid game. So this is just giving you consistent removal and helps you so much. Then we have Titanic Wake. When you summon a unit with 8 attack, health, or cost, grant it 8/8. Now again, almost every unit you pull out, especially once you get a couple stacks from your 2nd star power, is going to hit this threshold. And so it's just making your big units even bigger. So again, excellent one for you. Then last up here, round start, grant my weakest enemy that vulnerable. Since again, you don't really have much removal, making sure you're going to give the enemy that vulnerable so you can try to take out the enemy targets with your units can be quite nice. So anything that's helping you do that is excellent. Now, taking a look at support champions, as always, not a exhaustive list, but just something to consider. So up first, we have card generation. Now this can be done with just draw, but anyone that's able to give you some more cards. So draw, invoke, manifest, just anything that's generating more cards for you can be good just to make sure you don't run out of things to play. Next up then, we have extra attacks. Again, this could be rallies, scouts, free attacks. Anything like that is very good to help keep triggering your 2nd star power. And then big units. Anyone else that can have a big, impactful unit that if it gets pulled out with your call to arms is really going to change the game, that is great for you. So up first, we have Twisted Fate, because he's pretty much giving you more draw than anyone else in the game. But especially for card generation, you really just want to look at the items your support cards are getting. So if they have extra draw on it, if they have like the Emperor's deck of when you play the card, you get another card from the Emperor's deck back, or a manifest, invoke, any support champions that are just able to get some of those upgrades on their cards, still worth picking up or at least considering. Extra attacks, Aurelia is great for that. Her free attacks with all the blades are great to be able to constantly get some more scaling from your 2nd star power. Then for big units, Volibear is great, especially with any sigils you get, so it can make actually physically playing some of those bigger units a little bit easier as well. Now, as far as some cards to look out for, up here on the left, we have a big unit, or expensive unit at least. When I'm summoned, draw 2, give other allies 1/1 this round. It's doing a lot for you, helping you with your draw, also buffing up your units, and this is a summon effect. Summon effect's very important for you. Crumbling Sands, obliterate a follower, draw 1, letting you take out an enemy target, so helping your removal and helping your draw. Excellent for you. Scar Mother, when I survive damage, grant me 3 power. Pretty big unit, also has that strike, draw 1. Again, just helping you with that card generation. Revna, the Lore Keeper, when I'm summoned, grant units in your deck my stats, then draw another unit with 5+ power. Again, great. It's a summon effect. It's giving you more scaling for your deck, and it's trying to draw out a card for you. Guiding Touch, heal an ally or an Nexus Tube, draw 1. So good sustain, more draw. Temple Caretaker, play updraft 1 to either draw 1 or refill your spell mana. Good flexibility here to either just, for 1, updraft, which is good to put some of your expensive cards back in your deck so they can further scale, get some more cost reduction, and try to get pulled out through your Call to Arms. But then you either can draw a card if you need it, or refill your spell mana, which can potentially help you play your Call to Arms. So just really good flexibility there. And then last up, Catalyst, get an empty mana gem, heal your Nexus 3, and then it's also had Hero's Call, so draw a unit. So seeing something like this is going to give you some sustain, ramp, and again, help you with draw is excellent. So it's really these types of cards that are filling in some of your weaknesses, such as your lack of removal or lack of draw, or ones that are further playing into your strengths of being able to pull out big units, trigger summon effects, and buff up your deck. All of these are the type of cards you want to be looking for as you're playing through. Now, last up, let's finish with his rankings. I think before level 20, he's a little rough, kind of a C tier champion, and after level 20, I think he can go up to B tier. With the right build and before your 6 stars, I think he can be fine. But I think once you get into 6 stars, he gets an incredible amount of strength and just becomes much more consistent. I don't think you need the 6 star to succeed. You can still clear all the content before then, but you do get a pretty massive power spike with your 6 star. As far as pros, I think he is feeling pretty unique to play. He can kind of feel a little bit like Pyke with trying to make sure you have the right unit in your top deck and trying to get a consistent attack in every round. But overall, he feels pretty unique. Definitely, they took him in a different direction that I wasn't expecting with Tryndamere. Also, he has some pretty decent scaling. As far as some cons, you don't really have any utility. That being, you don't really have the tools to deal with a lot of situations. You don't have good ways to protect your units. You don't have good removal. You don't have good draw. And so there's a lot of that utility or tools to handle different situations. You're really lacking that. And you can be a bit inconsistent, both with kind of running out of things to play, or also just inconsistent with knowing what you're going to be able to pull out with your Call to Arms. As far as his regional rankings, now I am putting him at the bottom. This is more considering the champions that have constellations. I think I would rather have either Ashe or Volibear. I think both of them are stronger in my opinion. Now, he is of course stronger than a lot of all the other champions that don't have their constellation. So I could also put him in mid, but as far as ranking him against the other constellation champions, he is at the bottom because both Ashe as well as Volibear just have so many more tools to handle a lot of situations the enemy might throw at you, having more control, more removal, and definitely more draw. Overall, though, he is a pretty fun champion and very interesting to play because he feels very different than really any other champion. And honestly, that's the most important part of any champion coming to the game. Do they feel different and unique to play? And Tryndamere definitely does. All right, that's it from my guide. I hope this was able to help you out. If it did, like and subscribe. Always appreciated, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.